All right, let's jump into a deep dive that takes us all the way to Cambodia.
Sounds intriguing.
We're going to be looking at an HR policy document, 385, 398, 11.pdf.
Okay.
But here's the twist. It's written entirely in Khmer.
Wow, so we're going beyond just HR policies here. We're getting a glimpse into Cambodian culture itself.
Exactly. Think of us as your translators and guides, helping you decipher what this document reveals about work life in Cambodia.
You know, we often assume HR practices are pretty universal, but the reality is they can be vastly different depending on where you are in the world.
So true. So let's start with the structure of this document.
Yeah.
Glancing at the table of contents, it looks pretty familiar at first glance.
Yeah, you've got your typical sections: recruitment, leave policies, disciplinary procedures, grievance handling, the usual suspects.
Right, the structure itself isn't surprising.
But what is interesting is the tone.
Yeah.
It's very formal, almost legalistic. It feels like every word has been carefully chosen for its weight and meaning.
Like it's straight out of a law textbook.
Exactly. And that makes me wonder if that formality reflects a deeper cultural aspect, perhaps a strong emphasis on respecting authority.
That's a really good point. And it makes me think about how hierarchy might function in Cambodian workplaces. Would you say it's more top-down compared to what we see in some Western companies?
It's definitely something to consider. And speaking of hierarchy, we can't overlook the foreword to this policy document.
Oh, what's special about the foreword?
Well, it's written by the Minister of Rural Development himself.
Wow, so this isn't just some internal company memo. We're talking about a document with a high level of official backing.
It is. It shows that these policies are considered important at a national level, not just within individual organizations. And the minister's words are interesting. It's not just about setting rules. There's a sense of aspiration, a hope that these policies will actually improve the well-being of the workforce.
So it's almost like they're saying, look, we're not just trying to control people, we're trying to create a work environment that benefits everyone.
Exactly. And that brings up the question of how fairness is perceived in Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
Is it more about collective well-being as opposed to individual rights, which is often the focus in Western societies?
That's a fascinating distinction. It seems like fairness isn't a one-size-fits-all concept. It's shaped by the values and priorities of a particular culture.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this deep dive so exciting. We're not just learning about HR policies, we're uncovering a whole new way of thinking about work and society.
All right, so we've got this backdrop of formality, an emphasis on authority, and this focus on collective well-being. Now, let's dig into the specifics of these policies. What jumps out at you as we start translating?
One of the first things that caught my eye was the section on leave policies. It covers the usual stuff: annual leave, sick leave, but then it gets really interesting with the provisions for public holidays.
Ah, because Cambodia has its own unique set of holidays, right?
Yeah.
Not just the ones we might be familiar with in the West.
Precisely. And these holidays aren't just about time off work. They offer a glimpse into the heart of Cambodian culture and history.
For example, what kind of holidays are we talking about?
Well, there's Chum Ben, which is a time when Cambodians honor their ancestors. Families gather, visit temples, offer food to the spirits. It's a really important part of their spiritual life.
It's like their version of Day of the Dead, but with a uniquely Cambodian flavor.
Exactly. And then there's the Khmer New Year, a massive celebration marking the beginning of the year. Imagine vibrant parades, traditional music, everyone dressed to the nines. It's like their Christmas and New Year's all rolled into one.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I'd love to experience that someday.
It's truly a sight to behold. And the fact that these specific holidays are mentioned in a formal HR policy document speaks volumes.
It's like saying these holidays are non-negotiable, they're part of who we are, and we're going to make sure everyone has the opportunity to celebrate them.
Precisely. And that gives us a clue about the values underpinning Cambodian work culture. It's not just about productivity, it's about honoring traditions and maintaining those social connections.
So we're starting to see how this document reveals the richness of Cambodian culture, and we've only just begun.
It's going to be an exciting deep dive. It's fascinating how these holidays give us a glimpse into the Cambodian understanding of time.
Oh, how so?
Well, it's not just a linear progression for them, it's cyclical. There's a deep respect for the past and its influence on the present.
That's a really interesting point. I wonder how that cyclical view of time might affect their approach to work. Do you think there's more of an emphasis on long-term commitment, building relationships over time, rather than just chasing quick wins?
It's certainly a possibility. Speaking of relationships, let's shift gears to the section on disciplinary procedures.
Okay, what's interesting about that?
Well, here's where we see a stark contrast with Western approaches. In many Western companies, disciplinary action is all about documentation, strict protocols, making sure everything's legally sound.
Yeah, it's like building a legal case file, right? Protecting the company.
Exactly. But in this Cambodian document, the focus is on communication, guidance, giving employees a chance to correct their course. It's less about punishment, more about rehabilitation.
That's a really different approach. It sounds almost like a parent guiding a child, teaching them right from wrong rather than just hitting them with consequences.
That's a great analogy. It ties back to that paternalistic tone we saw in the minister's foreword. There's this sense of responsibility for the employee's well-being, not just their output.
It makes you wonder if a Western company would ever say something like, hey, you messed up, but we believe in you. We're here to help you learn from this.
It's definitely a different mindset.
Yeah.
This emphasis on rehabilitation, I wonder if it stems from that value of harmony and social cohesion we talked about earlier.
You mean maybe conflict is seen as something to be worked through with understanding and guidance, not through adversarial means?
Exactly. So moving on to the section on grievance handling.
Okay, what's interesting about that?
Well, in many Western countries, if you have a serious issue at work, you might lawyer up, file a formal complaint, maybe even threaten legal action.
Right, it can get very confrontational.
It can. But this Cambodian document emphasizes internal resolution, mediation, dialogue. It's about finding common ground.
It seems like avoiding confrontation is a key theme here. Maintaining harmony, even in the face of disagreements.
Exactly. There's this recurring emphasis on harmony, respect for authority, a focus on rehabilitation over punishment. It all points to a very different approach to work culture.
It's amazing how these values seem to be interwoven throughout the document, like threads in a tapestry.
And it reminds us that what might seem normal or best practice in our own cultures is just one way of doing things. There are so many other approaches out there.
You know, as fascinating as these specifics are, I almost forgot to step back and think about the bigger picture. What does all this tell us about Cambodia as a whole?
Well, we have to be careful about generalizing from one document. This is just a snapshot of a particular organization or sector.
Right, we can't assume it represents the entirety of Cambodian society.
But it does give us some valuable insights. For instance, that emphasis on hierarchy and respect for authority, it might reflect similar power dynamics in other areas of Cambodian life.
Like in families or community organizations?
Precisely. And the focus on harmony and conflict resolution through dialogue could suggest a societal preference for social cohesion and avoiding confrontation.
It seems like there's a strong emphasis on maintaining positive relationships, finding amicable solutions.
Right. But of course, we can't ignore the historical and political context that has shaped Cambodia.
Of course not. The impact of events like the Khmer Rouge regime and the subsequent rebuilding process must have had a profound effect on their cultural values.
Absolutely. Understanding that context is crucial for gaining a more nuanced perspective.
It's a reminder that culture is constantly evolving, adapting to changing circumstances.
And that's what makes it so fascinating to study. There's always more to uncover, new perspectives to consider.
It feels like we've only scratched the surface of Cambodian culture with this document. It's left me with so many questions, so much more I want to explore.
That's the beauty of a good deep dive. It opens up new avenues of inquiry and makes us eager to learn more.
You know, it's remarkable how a simple HR policy document can lead us down such a fascinating path into Cambodian culture.
Absolutely. It highlights how culture permeates even the most mundane aspects of life. We often associate culture with things like art, music, or cuisine, but it's also deeply embedded in systems and structures like this.
It really is. And I think there's a valuable lesson here for our listeners. Always be observant. Whether you're looking at a company handbook, a legal document, or just listening to a conversation, there are always clues to be found, different ways of thinking to be considered.
Exactly. Approach the world with curiosity, a willingness to look beyond the surface, and you'll be amazed at what you might discover.
You know, throughout this exploration of the Cambodian HR policy, I've been struck by the stark contrast with Western approaches to work. It's almost like comparing two entirely different operating systems.
It's true. Those differences can be so insightful. Take the emphasis on rehabilitation over punishment, for example. It really challenges the Western focus on individual accountability and legal procedures.
It makes you wonder if there are alternative, maybe even better ways to approach conflict resolution, prioritizing harmony and understanding rather than just determining who's right or wrong.
It's a thought-provoking question, and it underscores the importance of cultural sensitivity, especially in our increasingly interconnected world. Whether you're conducting business internationally, traveling abroad, or simply interacting with people from different backgrounds, being mindful of these cultural nuances can be incredibly valuable.
It all comes down to recognizing that there isn't one right way to do things. Different cultures have different values, different approaches, different perspectives on the world. And that diversity is something to be celebrated, not feared.
Absolutely. It enriches our understanding, broadens our perspectives, helps us grow as individuals.
So, what's the key takeaway here? I believe it's about embracing curiosity, being open to new ways of thinking, acknowledging that learning is a lifelong journey.
It's also about recognizing the power of a deep dive. Taking the time to really explore a topic, even one that might initially seem dull or technical, can lead to unexpected discoveries and profound insights.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of Cambodian culture with this HR policy document. It's left me with so many new questions, so many paths I want to explore further.
And that's what we hope to inspire in our listeners as well. That desire to keep exploring, questioning, and diving deeper into the world around us.
So, until next time, keep those deep dives going. Happy exploring, everyone.